Imagine this. You're in the middle of a heated argument, your heart is racing, every word feels like a weapon, and each sentence is part of a battle. You're focused, trying to choose the perfect response to prove you're right, but the other person is doing the exact same thing. Neither of you is truly listening. You're both just waiting for your turn to strike back. Then someone steps in. Let's call him N. He doesn't take sides. He doesn't tell you what to say. Instead, he quietly whispers something that shakes you. You've already lost. What does he mean? You're defending yourself. You're standing your ground. How could that be defeat? According to N, the moment you get pulled into this kind of fight, you've already given up your power. He believed real strength doesn't come from arguing or proving a point. It comes from something far more surprising. So what is this hidden power? And why does silence sometimes speak louder than words? Most people think power is about winning arguments, proving others wrong, and dominating conversations. But Friedrich Nietzsche, yes, that N, had a very different idea. He believed true power isn't in words, it's in self-control. He asked, why do people argue in the first place? Often, it's not about truth. It's about ego. People argue because their identity feels threatened. Admitting they're wrong can feel like losing a part of themselves. So they fight, not to be right, but to protect their pride. Many arguments are really power struggles. It's about who speaks last, who raises their voice, or who forces the other to back down. Sometimes people argue just to seem smart or strong in front of others, but Nietzsche saw these reactions as signs of weakness. To him, if someone can provoke you and you react emotionally, they're controlling you, and you've already lost. Nietzsche's famous idea, the will to power, is often misunderstood. It's not about brute force, it's about shaping reality through strength of will. And that doesn't always require words. Sometimes the greatest power is simply not reacting. That's where Nietzsche's idea of the UberMench, or superior individual, comes in. This person stays calm. They choose when to speak and when to stay silent. They don't argue to win, they stay in control of themselves and the situation. Picture a meeting. Two people are arguing. One is loud, trying to dominate. The other stays calm, listens, and waits. When they finally speak, they say something short but powerful. The tone of the room shifts. Who really had the power? Nietzsche would say it's the one who kept control, who didn't let emotions take over. Silence, when used wisely, isn't weakness. It's strategy. It makes the other person reveal more, feel uncertain, and sometimes even question their own words. It's not about being quiet. It's about knowing when silence says more than shouting ever could. Have you ever stayed silent in a conversation and watched it shift everything? Tension makes people uncomfortable, and that discomfort gives you control. The Ubermensch doesn't just stay silent during arguments. He uses silence as a powerful tool. It's a pause, a moment of restraint, a well-timed response that can completely turn the conversation in his favor. Nietzsche's idea of power isn't about fighting loudly. It's about mastering the battlefield before the fight even starts. Silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a tool, a weapon used by some of history's greatest minds to dominate battles of intellect, business, and war. Nietzsche saw power as influence, control, and strategic patience, not just winning debates or shouting the loudest. Let's look at three legendary figures who live by this idea: Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Miyamoto Musashi. Socrates. Winning without fighting. Socrates never shouted or attacked in arguments. Instead, he used the Socratic method, a way of asking questions that made people reveal their own contradictions. Imagine a proud Athenian politician who claims to be the wisest man in the city. Instead of challenging him directly, Socrates simply asks, "What is wisdom?" The politician confidently tries to explain, but with every question Socrates asks, his answers start to fall apart. He ends up stumbling, realizing he didn't truly understand what he bragged about. Socrates didn't need to tell people they were wrong. He helped them see it themselves. This is silent power, leading people to discover the truth on their own rather than forcing it on them. Steve Jobs. The art of controlled conflict. If Socrates used questions, Steve Jobs used strategic persuasion. He didn't waste energy arguing every little point. Instead, he controlled the bigger picture. For example, when his engineers wanted physical buttons on the iPhone, Jobs wanted a full touchscreen. Rather than arguing endlessly, he guided the team until they believed the touchscreen was not only possible, but inevitable. He didn't force his opinion. He made them feel it, emotionally. Instead, he controls how others react. Musashi proved that silence, patience, and psychological dominance can be more powerful than brute force. What do Socrates, Steve Jobs, and Musashi all have in common? They never wasted energy on useless arguments. They didn't just react. They controlled the situation and set the terms of engagement. They understood that true power isn't in loud words, but in influence and control. So next time you feel the urge to argue, ask yourself, am I reacting emotionally or am I controlling the situation? Because real power is silent. Why do we argue so much? Why do we feel the need to prove ourselves right or defend our ideas, even when the argument isn't going anywhere? Most people believe arguments are about truth. They're not. Arguments are about power. The more you argue, the more you reveal about yourself, your insecurities, your emotional triggers, and most importantly, the fact that someone else might be controlling how you react. Nietzsche understood this deeply. His concept of will to power wasn't just about physical strength. It was about mastering yourself so well that others fall under your influence without even noticing. Modern psychology proves how true this is. Why do people get trapped in arguments? Because arguments aren't logical, they're psychological. When we argue, we think we're defending beliefs, but often we're just reacting to deep-rooted emotional triggers. Here are 3 reasons why. 1. Cognitive biases. Our brain wants to win, not learn. Confirmation bias makes us only notice facts that support what we already believe. The backfire effect makes us double down when someone challenges us. The Dunning-Kruger effect means the less we know, the more confident we feel. These biases make arguments pointless. Nobody really listens. They just wait for their turn to speak. Nietzsche's UberMench avoids this trap by listening, observing, and choosing wisely when to engage. 2. Emotional triggers. We take arguments personally because they challenge our identity. When someone disagrees deeply, it feels like a personal attack. That's why debates about politics, religion, or philosophy often turn ugly quickly. The most powerful people never argue emotionally. If someone can make you angry or upset, they control you. The Ubermensch stays calm, watches, analyzes, and only responds when it's worth it. 3. Need for validation. At the core, many arguments aren't about truth, they're about ego. People want to be seen as right, not just be right. Nietzsche knew humans seek approval from the group. People argue to prove their status, to be accepted, or to avoid feeling small. Have you ever noticed yourself arguing just to feel accepted or to prove a point, rather than to find the truth? Many people argue not to find the truth, but to gain approval. But the Ubermensch doesn't need validation from others. He creates his own truth. Think about history's most influential figures. Did they waste time arguing with critics? Number. They stayed focused on their vision, ignored distractions, and let their actions speak louder than words. Nietzsche was ahead of his time. His ideas about power, control, and silence fit perfectly with what modern psychology teaches us today. Let's break it down. First, power dynamics in social situations show that the most powerful people aren't those who talk the most, but those who control the flow of conversation. They don't interrupt or over-explain. Instead, they choose their words carefully, making others hang on every sentence. That's why powerful leaders rarely raise their voices. They don't need to. When they speak, people listen because they have already built an aura of authority through silence. Second, research shows that people who stay calm and composed in arguments are much more persuasive than those who get emotional. Calmness signals confidence. Nietzsche believed true power comes from mastering yourself. The Ubermensch doesn't react like a slave to emotions. He decides when and how to respond, making him untouchable. The real reason Nietzsche valued silence wasn't to avoid conflict, but because the person who controls their reaction controls the whole conversation. Think about it. If someone insults you and you react, you've lost. If you feel the urge to defend yourself, you've lost. If you get pulled into an argument just to prove you're right, you've lost. But if you observe, stay calm, and respond only when it serves your purpose, you've already won. Nietzsche's philosophy isn't about staying silent forever. It's about choosing your battles wisely. Ask yourself, am I speaking because I want to or because I feel forced to? Am I reacting emotionally or controlling my response? Is this argument worth my energy or am I just feeding my ego? Because true power is not in words, but in the silence before words. The pause that makes others lean in, the choice to speak only when it truly matters. But does this mean you should? Many people avoid arguments because they feel uncomfortable. But Nietzsche understood that discomfort builds strength. He saw struggle as necessary, not something to run from. Weak thinkers avoid challenges, while strong thinkers welcome them, because challenges help us grow and improve. Imagine a warrior who never steps into battle. A sword never tested against steel will never be ready for war. In the same way, a mind that's never challenged stays dull, weak, and fragile. Without intellectual conflict, our ideas go untested. Without struggle, our beliefs stay hollow. Think about the boldest thinkers in history. Galileo was condemned for challenging the church's view of the universe. Socrates was sentenced to death for questioning common beliefs. Nietzsche himself was called a madman in his time. Yet today their ideas still shape how we think. Their power didn't come from silence alone. It came from choosing their battles wisely and engaging in the conflicts that mattered. There's a big difference between arguing just to prove you're right and arguing to change reality. Nietzsche understood this well. Great leaders, philosophers, and visionaries don't avoid arguments. They use them strategically. For example, Socrates didn't attack beliefs directly. He asked questions until those beliefs fell apart on their own. Nietzsche wrote to challenge and shake people out of mental comfort. Steve Jobs didn't shy away from conflict. He used it to push people beyond limits and inspire innovation. Powerful people don't argue for validation. They argue to create change. They don't fight to win debates. They fight to shape the world according to their vision. The UberMench doesn't argue to satisfy ego, but argues with purpose. So, when should you engage in arguments? When the debate sharpens your thinking, reveals deeper truths, pushes you or others to grow, or shifts power in your favor. When should you avoid it? When you're just defending your ego, when the other person isn't open to change, when it's a pointless emotional battle, or when your silence is itself a powerful move. Arguing without a plan is weakness. Arguing with precision is power. Nietzsche wasn't afraid of arguments. He embraced conflict, but on his own terms. If an argument makes you weaker, avoid it. If it makes you stronger, engage. If it's just a distraction, ignore it. Conflict, when mastered, becomes a tool for strength. True power isn't just in silence. It's in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Imagine you wake up one day and hear a voice telling you, you have only 100 words left to speak for the rest of your life. Every word counts now. Would you waste those words on a heated argument? Would you spend them trying to prove yourself to someone who isn't even listening? Or would you choose them carefully like a warrior sharpening his final sword before battle? This is where real power lies. Nietzsche understood something most people miss. Words are like currency. The more you spend them carelessly, the less valuable they become. Now picture yourself in an argument. Your heart races, your mind floods with comebacks and defenses. You're dying to prove your point, but stop, breathe, ask yourself, who really holds the power here? The one frantically trying to prove himself, or the one who knows when to stay calm and speak with purpose? What would you do if you only had 100 words left to speak in your life? Would you argue or choose your words wisely? Stay silent, because silence is not weakness. It's strategy, it's control. It's the art of making others question themselves without you ever needing to convince them. So here's a challenge for you. The next time you're about to argue, pause. Instead of reacting immediately, observe. Watch how the other person reveals their weaknesses. Notice their fears and insecurities just through the way they speak. Then, when the time is right, choose your words like a master, or don't speak at all, because true power is silent. What might happen if you practice silence as a strategy in your next disagreement?